How much is money? Well, that is a popular phrase in a song by Chinedu Okoli, better known by his stage name as Mr. Flavor. Tonight, well, we do not have Mr. Flavor, but we have Babajide Ogunsanwo, a founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's data analyst, to share more insights about how much is the money that Nigeria actually owes. Babajide, great to have you on the News at 10.
Good evening, Anthony. How much is money?
How much is money? I'm sure many Nigerians love that song, but anyway, that's not what we're talking about now. We're talking about how much money Nigeria owes. And of course, the Debt Management Office, the DMO, earlier this week released some reports, on Nigeria's debt status. What do the latest statistics mean? Where are we? What can you tell us?
Summary, from these statistics, there's good news and there's bad news. And I'll go into the good news and bad news. But with respect and with reference to what exactly is the country's debt position, there are three questions that the Nigerians are asking. The first is, what is the state of the debt? In simple terms, how much is money? How much does Nigeria owe? The second question is, why does the debt keep rising? Now, the third and final question that Nigerians are asking is, will Nigeria ever be able to pay back this debt? So I'd like to take each of these questions and provide answers and some insights to this. The first is, how much does Nigeria owe? And from this report, it shows that the country's debt, and by country we're talking about the federal government and the state governments, the country's debt is put at 121 trillion naira as at the end of March this year. You heard that right, 121 trillion naira. The concern of Nigerians and the concern of that report, however, is that 90% of this 121 trillion naira is owed by the federal government. So as a country, 121 trillion naira, the federal government, 90% of this amount. The second question is, why does the debt keep rising? And the answer is simple. It's because we are spending more than our income. And I'd like to use two examples to explain this. Spending more than our income. Please listen carefully to this. In 2011, the federal government earned an income of 3.5 trillion naira. That was 2011, 3.5 trillion naira. Last year, the estimates that we're expecting when the results and the numbers are audited, we're looking at a number of about 10 trillion naira. However, the challenge is, what 3.5 trillion naira will get you in 2011, 10 trillion naira wouldn't get you. In simple terms, looking at the value of money, the government is better off earning 3.5 trillion naira in 2011 than earning 10 trillion naira last year, because the exact value of 3.5 trillion naira in 2011 in today's money based on inflation is 18 trillion naira. So clearly the government is earning significantly less even compared to what we were earning a dozen years ago. One. Now the second example again, and again please listen carefully to this. Nigeria of 2011 is so different from Nigeria of today. Here's what I mean. In 2011, we had a population of 160 million. Now, that has grown by an additional 60 million to 220 million. In simple terms, Nigeria has given birth to a nation. 60 million is the equivalent population of South Africa. So what we have compared to 2011, to today's terms, is we have Nigeria and another country called South Africa in one. And imagine the situation where our population has significantly grown, yet government revenue has declined. And so what is happening is, that is the reason why we are borrowing more. And clearly, the third and final question, will Nigeria be able to ever pay off this debt? Some of these answers have gotten us into trouble, but we'll keep speaking the truth.
We'll keep speaking the truth. But let's now look at the information, of course. How much of that is available to the use of the debt? Now, is the return, or should I say, the return on debt greater than the cost that we are actually going to pay to service this debt?
There isn't sufficient evidence to prove that the return of debt is higher than the cost. What we see from this report, the amount we are paying as debt service is almost equivalent of what the federal government is earning in revenue. In simple terms, almost all of the government's revenue is going to service external and domestic debt. Let's take a look at what exactly has happened since the last dozen years. We're able to really compare our external debt with what has happened. Excuse me. Under Goodluck Jonathan, in June 2011, external debt $3 billion. He left it at $7 billion. In simple terms, external debt grew by $4 billion, an average of $1 billion per year. When President Buhari came in, the external debt was $7 billion. When he left, it was $39 billion. In simple terms, under former President Buhari, external debt grew by $32 billion, an average of $4 billion of additional external debt per year. The good news is that President Tinubu is doing all he can do to reduce external borrowings. So we've seen actually the external debt moderate under President Tinubu. He is looking elsewhere for source of income, not external debt. However, his source and his interest clearly seems to be domestic debt. See what has happened to domestic debt position under former President Jonathan. Domestic debt went from 5.2 trillion naira to 8.4 trillion naira, a growth of 3.2 trillion naira, an average growth of approximately 800 billion naira per year. Domestic debt from under former President Buhari went from 8.4 trillion naira to 48.3 trillion naira, a growth of 40 trillion naira, approximately 5 trillion naira of new domestic debt per year. Under President Tinubu, we've seen that move again from 48.3 trillion naira, and to this, what we see in this current report, 61.6 trillion naira. However, President Tinubu is saying most of these new domestic borrowings are really not because of him. He's saying that the accounts and the records are being changed and that they are now considering some of the debt that was borrowed under President Buhari that was not accounted for. So he's saying that yes, this government has borrowed trillions of naira locally. However, President Tinubu is also saying that they're having to adjust their accounts because there were some debts that were borrowed from the central bank that were not properly accounted for under former President Buhari.
So going forward, Babajide, how can these statistics be improved? I mean, talking about our debt statistics, what is the outlook on borrowing as well?
We need to really focus on these numbers. You know, I was talking about how easy will it be for us to pay our debt. And please listen carefully to this. In 2011, under President Jonathan, external debt was $3 billion. But then our external reserves was $33 billion. So we had a lot more external reserves. Today, our external debt is $37 billion, and our external reserves is still $33 billion. In simple terms, the value of our external debt today is greater than the value of our external reserves. However, what has happened is we failed to look at what are other things that could improve our position. Let's take a look at the final statistics, the chart of the week. It allows us to see how we've gotten to where we are. 2011, financial year, the federal government earned 3.5 trillion naira. Last year, we're looking at approximately 10 trillion naira, a growth of 186%. But look at those two other columns, domestic debt. It has grown by 852% under the same period. Look at our external debt, from $3.5 billion in 2011 to $37 billion, a growth of almost 1,000%. So what we've clearly seen is domestic debt growing, external debt growing, revenue not growing as fast. What is one solution? The one solution we need to understand is it is easy to borrow money, but it is not easy to borrow quality of governance. In simple terms, the government is throwing a lot of money at the problem whose solution really is we need better quality of governance. And so if we keep pouring money and pouring water into a basket, we wouldn't hold anything. Going forward, what the government needs to do is quality of governance. Those three words. That is what, if we should borrow quality of governance.
Quality of governance, that's the most important thing. Babajide Ogunsanwo, thank you so much for your thoughts on the news at 10.
How much is money?
How much is money?